guys, welcome back to the NewsNowNation channel. Today we are talking to Yash Kulkarni. Yash is the co-founder of a company called OrxaGrid. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Kind
I
of?
mean, the island, but yeah, so it's OrxaGrid.
OrxaGrid, and this is essentially a company. It's a startup that is sort of trying to make a revolutionary change when it comes to managing energy systems across the globe. And today we're going to talk to Yash about the energy industry in India, about how OrxaGrid is trying to bring out a sustainable change, and how we can learn more about this and incorporate it into our systems that we already have functioning. So thank you, Yash, for doing this. We're really grateful for your time.
Thanks, Nishi.
Awesome.
Really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So are we. Okay, so to start with, can you tell me a little bit about, firstly, how this idea came up and your educational background and how that contributed to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So how this idea came about? Okay, so my background first. That'll be a little more put things in perspective.
Yeah.
So I did my bachelor's in electrical engineering from US, from University of Illinois Urbana Campaign. And then post graduation, I took up a job as a design consultant at an engineering services company in Portland, Oregon. So this company, through the company, I used to basically provide design consultancy to a federal power company called Bonneville Power. They were a federal power generation company based in the northwest of the US. Right, so that was my first introduction to the world of transmission and distribution of electricity. So I did that for about a year, and then I came back to India to join my dad's business. So so our family business is also in the electricity sector, but that's more focused in India. Through the family business, which is Scope PNM. We provide testing instruments to test the electricity grid infrastructure, right? So that's again transmission and distribution of electricity. So I was doing that for about 2013 to 2014. I was in the US. So 2014 I came back. So about 3 years I was working with my dad, and at the same time my brother, he was in London doing his MBA, and then he was working for a renewables kind of company. So they were doing something called demand response, right? So demand response is where there is shortage of electricity in the grid in the grid. So at that time you have one and two choices, right? One is that you do power cuts, what we face in India, or the second is where you incentivize the customers to reduce their consumption so that the electricity would be enough for all the consumers, right? So one response is where you are incentivizing the consumers to saying that voluntarily, don't turn on your ACs at the peak hours so that there'll be electricity for the other consumers, right? So he was that aspects, and he was in basically that, and then renewables and things like that. Whereas I was more focused in the old school legacy grid management kind of activities to my dad's business. So we were discussing, where we realized that there's this big gap in the market, basically between what the media and what this whole hype around renewables, demand response, all these cool things that are in the sector. Between that and between where the actual grid is today, how do we bridge this gap to make these things a reality in more day practice and things like that. So that around those ideas, that's when we came up with this concept of OrxaGrid, where we realized that majority of these renewables and things that are being connected are happening at a consumer level right now, right? So it's more of people like you and me who want to install rooftop solar, who want to be more conscious about our consumption. We want to support the infrastructure and things like that. So how do we enable them to do this? So with that idea, we realized that why not try to leverage IoT, Internet of Things, like low cost sensors, collect a lot of data, use some sort of machine learning algorithms, to be more real time and predictive in terms of what we should be doing, and then providing those alerts through say Twitter or other social media platforms to engage with our consumers, with our customers, to then be able to do a lot of different things. So in a nutshell, that's how the idea came around. That was my background into how I am where I am today.
Awesome. That's really cool. Before I get into more specifics about the company and understanding how exactly it works, just can you, as somebody who works in the energy space and who's worked in the traditional space as well, can you tell me how energy systems work in India in general? What is the majority?
Yeah.
And also, like, okay, once you answer that, also you said that you want to enable conscious citizens and you want to enable conscious people, and which makes it a very customer centric model, which is what I didn't know. In fact, for me, the whole world of electrical engineering seems so alien and seems something that only like people who are constructing things should get involved in. So how do you bridge that gap from something that is so like complex to like somebody from a non-engineering background, and make it so simple that they can understand?
Yeah. So you asked two questions.
Yeah.
Do is I think I'll answer your question about electrical engineering as a whole, and then talk more about power sector in India, right? So I mean, as an engineer from the US, I mean the one major difference that I noticed is that in the US, we had only one department. It was called Electrical and Computer Engineering, and then you really got admission into the school of electrical and computer engineering, right?
Correct.
You have electronics or EXTC or whatever different names that you or specializations that we have here in India.
Correct.
So when I joined college, I basically my first year was completely common. I did a lot of computer engineering courses as well as electrical engineering courses, and then by the second third year, you are free to choose whatever you want, right? So my personal experience, I did classes from biotech engineering, which was like learning about MRIs and CT machines and those things, to like courses in power as well as courses in like communications and telecom and things like that, right? So I was completely free to choose what path I wanted to navigate through that. And honestly, in electrical engineering, there are at least 10 different streams that you can basically pursue. And the whole idea of your bachelor's is to kind of figure out which way you want to go, right? For me personally, because I had this family business background, I knew I wanted to be in power. But as a general electrical engineer, it's power is very low in your preference of specializations that you kind of want to, just because of the money in the market and things like that. Right? So yeah, that's kind of the background in terms of how what stream you'd want to choose if you're an electrical engineer. But yeah, it's not like people who want to construct or the other ideas that you have about electrical engineering. I've been able to make that a little clearer. I can do a more deep dive into electrical engineering is if you want that.
Correct. And now about the power sector in India.
Okay, sure. Power sector in India or power sector in general. So electricity, it's split into three sub industries mainly. So there's generation, transmission, and distribution, right? In India specifically, in 2003, there was a law that came around where they unbundling. That's the word that they call it. So before you, like for example, in Maharashtra, you have Maharashtra State Electricity Board, which was one government company that did generation, transmission, and distribution.
Correct.
Then in 2003, they decided that there's too much nonsense happening here. Let's unbundle these companies, make them three separate companies, so they have three different P&Ls, and they're more profit driven. So. And that happened across the country, and that happened everywhere around the world as well. Most countries have this unbundling of electricity. So generation traditionally is dominated by fossil fuels, like of course. So that's mainly coal-fired power plants. Have oil or gas-based power plants. Then there's hydel power plants. And nowadays there are more renewables, which are like grid-connected solar, of course, wind energy, and different forms of electricity, sources of electricity that you can generate from.
But primarily in India today, electricity generation is primarily through fossil fuels?
Fossil fuels, of course, everywhere, globally. I mean, you'd find very few countries which are, like Germany and all, which is more renewable driven, or France, which is nuclear power driven, and so on. But most countries globally are still fossil fuel, right? And that's the idea that, there's so much discussion about renewables and solar and this and that. Accounts to maybe 10 to 20%. Like, that's my guess. I haven't researched on it, but it wouldn't be more than 20%. What happens is, if you have more renewables coming in, it becomes more and more difficult to manage, because as a consumer, you want to, like, as soon as you hit your switch, you want the lights to turn on, right? Like, you won't be really if your lights don't turn on when you hit the switch. And with solar, the problem is, you just can't predict, right? Like, there'll be a coverage and your generation will drop down to zero.
Correct.
For that instant, right? So you can't have more renewables when they come in. There's a lot more issues in management, and that's where OrxaGrid also comes in, right? Through IoT, improving the management of this electricity. But that's that generation, which is also kind of privatized. Like, you can tomorrow go, if you have land, you could set up a windmill, and you can connect it to the grid and sell electricity, right? So it allows private competition in generation. I'm talking about India. And then the other ones are transmission and distribution. Transmission is more like your interstate highways. So if you're generating electricity in Maharashtra, you can sell it in Assam or wherever you feel like. Right? So that's transmission, which is also quite stable. Like, in the last 5 odd years, India's pumped a lot of money in improving this whole transmission sector. You have this one nation, one grid concept, is what I was talking about, between Maharashtra and Assam, and you can basically sell it wherever you want. And last sector is discoms, distribution, which is in the city or within the state, and things like that, which is where right now all the entire focus of the sector is, right? Like, discoms, just headline news, discoms are loss making, discoms are, corrupt, blah, blah,
Discom means distribution and communication.
Distribution company.
Distribution company, acha.
Yeah. So that's we call them discoms, but distribution companies, right?
Got it.
Yeah, and those are completely loss making. There's a lot of push that's happening from the government to improve how do you solve this distribution crisis.
Correct.
There are multiple crises in the sector. Simple things that they don't know where they're selling electricity. They don't know who's consuming how much, because they don't have, most of the consumers, the rural consumers are not even metered. The guys like you and I in urban cities where we have metered, that meter reading ke liye also one fellow will come, take your reading, he'll make mistakes, they charge you what you want, and there's nothing you can do. There's nowhere that you can even go fight, argue. So that's one side of the issue. Second is, after they give you a bill also, for them to collect that revenue, come to your house, take your money and go, maybe you might be a good paying citizen, right? But most people don't pay their electricity bills on time and things like that as well. So there's a collection efficiency problem. There are many issues basically in the discom, and at least the next five odd years are going to go in improving that.
Improving the efficacy of these and all these processes and creating systems that work. All right. Coming back to OrxaGrid, I want to ask you about, so when I was going through the website, I saw a lot of focus on the entire renewability and the sustainability aspect of it. And because the company focuses so much on sustainability, can you tell me a little bit about how installing something like what you are producing can help in reducing your carbon emissions on an individual level and also on a countrywide level?
That's a good question, actually. So on a countrywide level, basically the idea is that if you manage your infra better, you could have a higher efficiency of transportation of electricity, right? So like making sure that, okay, in a country like India, more than 20% of electricity is lost either through electricity theft or to technical losses. Okay, so that's 20% of your coal that you are burning is going waste. Right. So you can bring that 20% to 10%. You can imagine how much carbon emissions you're saving on. Right.
Absolutely.
Global world averages are at like 5%, 6%, and things like that. So India is really terrible in terms of electricity loss. So that itself is your answer to like a countrywide solution on sustainability of problems. Second thing, that on an individual level, what we are trying to do is Okay, so what we do is we basically look at the problem from the distribution company perspective, right? Like we haven't looked at the problem from a consumer's perspective, because there are many guys. Well, in India, the market is not open enough for us to target consumers directly. But even in the UK, where the company is actually registered, there are a lot of companies who are doing this consumer-centric demand response schemes and things like that. So we try to look at the problem from the distribution company's perspective. And what I'm trying to say is that what we do is mainly yeah, somebody just came. No, what we do is more to enable you guys to be able to manage your rooftop solar installations as well as electric vehicles, right? Like that's the next big push in terms of sustainability that's coming around, and we are trying to not force, but we are trying to provide insights into where it makes sense to install electric vehicle charging points, where it makes sense to install rooftop solar, where it makes sense to install batteries, and so on, right? So even if you do install, you need to have the connections to the grid. You need to have that much spare capacity available for the grid to be able to buy that electricity, sell it back to consumers who need it, and so on, right? So it's not like tomorrow all of Pune will have electric vehicles, right? You'll probably have more EVs in, like, say, Baner or I don't know, whichever, like, it comes in pockets, and things like that. So So that's the idea mainly that I'm trying to
Got it.
address.
Makes sense. So again, to understand, OrxaGrid follows a B2B model. So you work with other companies instead of working directly with customers and marketing this entire idea of creating a more sustainable sense to customers directly.
So our customers are the distribution companies, right? So it's B2B with selling to the distribution companies, not to the consumers. So to consumers, we try to reach the consumers through the distribution companies, which are addressing their customers, which are the consumers. Yes.
Correct. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, so suppose I individually want to install this hardware on my solar panel. Is that possible?
Absolutely. In fact, there is so our latest creation, we call it the low carbon app. Okay, it's available on our website, and it's a free tool, at least at this stage. So you log in, if you know your latitude, longitude, you can put in the numbers, or you put in your address. It will, on Google Maps, will identify your house or your building. You click on it, and the software will basically analyze your rooftop capacity, what is available. It also through APIs is able to collect your demand history, like how much was your consumption, say, over the last 1 year. So even if you have like 100-acre land, but your consumption is only enough for, say, 1 acre of installation, so we will tell you, that okay, you need to install only, say, 10 solar panels or something like that, which will take care of needs. If you want to install more, then what is the payback that you will have? What is, like, how much you will be back to the grid and all. And then we expand this out to actually then go to the next step, where we do the installation. We coordinate with the discoms to allow you to have that connections and things like that. But yeah, definitely go for the app.
So definitely. And just to understand, so this also has a gigantic monetary impact, right? Because technically it's not just like, okay, renewable and ethics and sustainability, but also because you have to install probably less solar panels than you would have thought you need to. Plus, you said something in the beginning of the interview of incentivizing to use less energy. Yeah. So both these things have monetary impacts, I'm sure.
Well, they do, definitely. Like, in terms of that installation aspects, that's where we want to head towards. It's like, see, as a consumer, even if, like, you do care about the environment, you do care about global health and electricity for all and all of these things. But even if you do want to install solar, it's a cumbersome process at this stage, right? You will probably go on Google, you'll try to identify who is going to do this job for you, and then that guy has this issue that he does want to sell to you, right? So he is going to try to maximize in terms of how many panels you want to install and things like that.
Correct.
So through this app, what we want to do is we want to basically empower the consumers to have an unbiased opinion about how much do I actually need, how much do I actually need to spend in terms of what are my paybacks and how much revenue I will generate over say a 25-year period and things like that. So it's more like an unbiased feasibility study. And that's why we are trying to bridge that gap between an installer and a consumer.
Correct. And I also think this sort of helps because you have so much data being tracked. Does it also help? Because you mentioned electricity theft happens a lot in India. So does it also help with that?
It could. So it really depends on how much you're monitoring, how much data you're being able to gather. In fact, we did. I mean, recently last year, I published a paper on this small pilot that we did with BEST. BEST is a supplier in India, right, in Bombay.
Correct.
They do for the buses as well as electricity. So we did a pilot in one of their rural areas where they are supplying electricity. The idea was to be able to forecast how much consumption that area would require, and if that forecast was off by say 40% or things like that, we then attribute it to things like either electricity theft or looking at weather data, whether the actual consumption had increased or whether it was because of some other problems and so on. Sorry, I lost my point with this paper.
Yeah.
I was saying about the theft aspects. So it really depends on how much you're monitoring, how much infra you can monitor, how much data you're collecting to then run these advanced algorithms, collect different efficiency drivers in that. So so that's my answer on the sustainability on the theft aspects, and then the incentivizing consumers. That's more of a regulatory aspect, right? Because power sector is heavily regulated in at least in our country as well as everywhere else in the world, right? Because it is a critical
Correct.
that
The sovereign
sort of
function.
social. Yeah. So our regulatory system is very weak, is what my personal opinion is, and they haven't really come around to solving this problem about how to incentivize consumers to consume less electricity. So um, it's a very distribution company focused regulation. They haven't really gotten around to providing this for the consumers. That's why in India we have a lot of power cuts, right? So I mean, I'm sure in Pune there's at least one day of the week you guys don't get electricity.
Absolutely. Thursday is known as power cut day.
Yeah, which is stupid, right? Like instead of that, if your discom would tell you that, hey, I'll pay you 5 rupees to not use your electricity today, or I would pay you 5 rupees if you ran your dishwasher or your washing machines at midnight instead of in the day, because you don't really need to care, right? When you wash clothes, as long as they are clean in the morning. So but that'll come around.
It'll
Around
come
the corner.
around. It'll come around. Awesome. Okay, so that was really cool. We are going to put the links for your low carbon app. Can it be downloaded on your phone?
No, you can access it through the web. You don't need to download it.
All right. So it's a website. So we're going to put that in our description, and we're also going to put a little more information about the company in our description. Thank you so much, Yash, for taking the time. This was extremely, I think, educative for me, and I'm really grateful that you did this. Thank you. We hope everybody who watches this enjoy.